I think we're ready to start.
Every piece of paper that I've submitted, no one has said.
Hello, hello. Can everybody hear okay? Folks in the back? Not at all. Hi, welcome everybody. Can everybody hear me okay in the back? No microphone? We're good? Better? Ooh, it's much quieter. Welcome everybody. We're so glad that you're here to Research and Technology Forum here at the Syracuse Center of Excellence. Thanks so much for coming. We have an exciting program for you today. It will be led off by our moderator, Professor Louise Manfredi. Before we go there, we want to acknowledge with respect the Onondaga Nation, firekeepers of the Haudenosaunee, the indigenous people on whose ancestral land Syracuse University now stands. We're awfully glad you're here. We welcome everybody on the webinar as well. The Syracuse Center of Excellence R&T Forum is brought to you by the partner program at Syracuse Center of Excellence. And we encourage everybody who is not a member but is interested in becoming a member to see me after the program. I'd love to talk to you about it a little bit more. It's my pleasure to introduce our moderator this afternoon. Dr. Louise Manfredi is an assistant professor of industrial and interactive design at Syracuse University. She's also a newly appointed SyracuseCoE faculty fellow, and we're so glad to welcome her to that program. Dr. Manfredi is focusing on two new areas of research interest: sustainable material testing, development, and adoption, as well as finding methods to improve the working relationship between designers and STEM practitioners. Both research agendas are woven through her teaching. She's always seeking innovative academics and industry partners to work with to create more immersive learning experiences for her students. Prior to joining Syracuse University, Dr. Manfredi was an assistant professor at Millersville University of Pennsylvania and a postdoc scholar in neuroscience and biomechanics, and an entrepreneurship fellow at the University of Chicago. She holds a PhD in mechanical engineering and a bachelor in design and product design from the University of Leeds in the UK. She's got this wonderful interaction of design and engineering, and we're just so thrilled that she could be with us today. Dr. Manfredi, come on up.
Thank you very much, Tammy. I have to confess that I'm a little bit unwell today, so I apologize if I am not particularly audible. I'm going to try really hard and look very surprised when my voice actually clears. So again, thank you very much for the opportunity and the honor of being here to facilitate this forum today. I would like to introduce our first speakers up to the front. I'd like to introduce Nikita Chatterjee and Brianna Howard. I have a wonderful working relationship with these two women, so I'm going to go a little bit off bio right now. I had the great pleasure of working with them at the Invent at SU program at Syracuse University. If you're unfamiliar with that, it's a student accelerator program that we run in the summer that is a partnership between Visual and Performing Arts and the College of Engineering and Computer Science. These two wonderful women created an extraordinary product this summer and were the winners of our campus edition. And I'm very thrilled that they're here to show you their work and explain how much they've accomplished in just under a year. Is that right, ladies? About a year. So I suppose I should tell you what they're studying. So Nikita is studying economics at the Maxwell School, and Brianna is in public health at Folk. So I will turn this over to you, ladies. Thank you.
Okay, I'm Nikita.
I'm Brianna.
And we're the co-founders of PAANI. How do we clicker change?
Should be right there.
No.
Back and forth.
Okay, yeah.
So we didn't really prepare too much for this. We're kind of going off the fly too, but our story begins like around this time last year, actually. Nikita and I were roommates, and she got an opportunity from Capital One. I'll let her explain that.
Well,
yeah.
we were friends before this because we were both pre-med students. And so we had met through pre-medical courses and studying and all that. So we were already good friends. Then we became roommates. And then around this time last year, I was offered a opportunity with Capital One's Women Entrepreneurship program, and the goal of the program was to find a solution for low-income communities. And so I took that and immediately thought of India because that's where my family is from. And so with Brianna's help, we looked into public health issues. We found that waterborne illnesses were the leading cause of death. And so we really decided to hone in on water and the water quality. So then we went into the launch pad and we met Linda, who has been our mom. But yeah, she really helped us guide. She guided us to really set a great foundation for where we wanted to go in the summer. And then she told us about Invented SU. We participated in Invented SU, and that was an interesting experience. But yeah, so
because I was a public health major, a lot of the classes that I was taking at that point, because I was a junior, were a lot of applied knowledge. So a lot of the research was international healthcare, understanding how healthcare systems work and how the government, health expenditure, and how that's filtered through the system. And then through that research, we found something interesting. So the sari cloth, which is a traditional garment worn by women in India, has actually been used to filter water to some extent because of its ability to extract large particles and contaminants. We have some of this research in our slides, which we'll go through. But once we learned that, we understood that it was important to because she had this goal of implementing a solution into a low-income community, we knew that when going into the community, they have to want to accept this product. They have to want clean water, which is something that when we think about it, it's so accessible. Even on campus, it's very accessible to get clean water. So we thought about, wow, I can just, even here, we have water here everywhere, but a woman in India has to walk about 4 miles to collect water. So that's just something that we knew that these are the realities that are being faced within the community, and that's something that we want to preserve, and that's something that we also want to highlight and use it to empower the people instead of, I guess, shaming them in any way.
yeah. And before we even got to Invented SU, we had worked with an NGO in India who conducted a needs assessment, customer discovery type of survey for us. And through that, we learned, why aren't you using filters that already exist? And their responses were kind of we don't know how to use it, or it's too expensive for us to spend money on. And so we wanted to find a way to provide this just basic access to cleaner water for them in a way that preserves their culture and their traditions and methodology that they're so familiar with, but also in a way that doesn't burden them financially. And so, yeah, now we're here.
Yeah, and I think for us, the major thing that we were concerned about was the fact that people were actually dying from waterborne illnesses, and it's why isn't there a solution for this? Why is it you hear people getting waterborne illnesses, but it's also leading to death, and that's something that's really just tragic to a child's life even. So
yeah.
Want to go through this?
Okay. So yeah, PAANI, if translated from Hindi to English, means water. It's a direct translation. And what we're doing is we're working to refine and not replace traditional water filtration systems throughout the slums of India.
Side to side.
I am looking at this one.
Back and forth, not working, side to side.
Is there,
I don't know.
All right, well, you will be able to click here.
Can you try the back and forth key?
Back and forth.
So, no, they're not working either, so. Sorry about that.
Sure. So this is kind of how we explain our problem. In 1947, when India and Pakistan were separating, my grandmother, amongst many other women in India, experienced firsthand the problems that started to come with the lack of access to clean water. It was a wartime, families were being separated, and as a result of the war, the quality of water was going down. It's 2019, and this is still the reality for many women who are living in the slums. Like Brianna mentioned, women and children have to walk about 4 miles to collect 20 liters of water every single day.
So,
Yeah.
So some of the research that we found, and these statistics are, well, some of these statistics come directly from the needs assessment that we conducted within the neighborhood. So 71% visit a local hospital more than once a month due to waterborne illnesses. So this is something that people are getting sick, not just once a month, but like they're having to go to the hospital frequently. And that was something that we found. It was 71%. That was a statistic that shocked us. And 68% share water connections between at least 10 other families. So some of that would be where one family who has a direct supply of tap water will sell it to their neighbors and allow them to use it.
Yeah, and overall, 163 million people in India don't have access to clean water at all.
So Nikita went to India. Do you want to talk about that? And you went this last December?
Yeah, so last December I visited India, and my family goes like every 2 years, but it was the first time I really started to pay attention to like what was going on around me. And when I started to think about the water quality in this project that we're doing, I remember my mom telling me like, don't drink the water unless, your grandmother has given it to you, or unless the bottle is sealed and you've gotten it from somewhere that's verified, because if you do drink the water, you're going to get sick, like period. And so when I was doing research on the slums, I realized how big of an actual problem it is.
So one of the problems that we found was with the quality of the water. There's a lot of contaminants within the water that are just causing a lot of bacterial illnesses within children and women as well. What else? Some of the top 3 diseases that are affecting these families are jaundice, typhoid disease, and even some strains of E. coli.
Yeah, I think it was found that a third of India's 600 districts were deemed unfit for drinking water. They're so poor in quality that the United Nations ranked them 120th out of 122 nations in terms of the quality of drinking water. So the contamination issue is prevalent and very large. There also isn't access to a filtration system that fits the behavioral tendencies of the user. So like I said, people don't use it because they don't know how to use it. And so our device kind of bridges that gap and preserves cultural tradition and methodology so that they're kind of more comfortable using it. Yeah, so we've engineered a water filtration system into a sari, which is a traditional garment worn by women in India.
So this is the traditional method that I was talking about earlier with the sari cloth. So in the picture depicted, the sari cloth is being hung over the container and the water is being poured through. And this is kind of related to cloth filtration, where if the water is poured through, all the large debris and contaminants are filtered out, which it's effective to some extent, but it still doesn't take out the small particles and contaminants that are like the viruses that may be present in the water.
Yeah, so this is the method that's been used for generations among these women. And then our device, we've enhanced it by adding these pouches, and they're filled with a disinfectant that we'll talk about what disinfectants do in a little while. But yeah, they're filled with the disinfectant. We've added an organic sensory mechanism as an indicator to the user as to when the filter is done being used. We've added an elasticity component so that when the user places the filter over the empty container, they're able to secure it. And then it follows the same folding methodology. You fold it twice, you place it over the empty container, and you pour the water through, except with the enhancements of the disinfectants. When you pour it through our device, it comes out clean.
So based on research, these were the main components that we found were used to treat water and are the most safe in terms of ingesting. So activated carbon removes odor, discoloration, and impurities. The calcium hydroxide, it softens the water, and that removes any totally dissolved solids. Sodium hypochlorite controls bacteria and fungi, and then the low sodium beeswax are the two components that are in our sensory mechanism, and that will indicate to the user that the filter is time to be.
So right now we're looking to incorporate, and we're kind of exploring different models that allow us to work with foundations like the Gates Foundation and the Rockefeller Foundation. We hope to partner with NGOs for distribution, recycling, and reuse. Trusted NGOs in the community are one of the ways that we think the user will kind of be more accepting towards our product. We also want to work with local hospital networks, kind of as a preventative method. So every time somebody comes in with a waterborne illness, they're given the filter as the preventative method. This will lower ER costs and the amount of citizens who go into the ER with waterborne illnesses. Yeah. So this is kind of what our timeline looks like. This summer, as Dr. Manfredi mentioned, we were in the Invented SU competition where we built a basic working prototype and were able to file a provisional patent. And then we were able to win the competition and move forward with continuing testing. As we go into the top of next year, we hope to continue doing intensive testing to come up with a final design. In March, we hope to take a trip to India to meet with some of the people doing water analysis for us, as well as NGOs who we plan on working with. In Q3, we want to secure manufacturing and distribution partners to be able to implement by the end of the year. So yeah, I'm Nikita. I am the co-founder of PAANI.
And Brianna, I'm also the co-founder, and Jacob he was recently added to our team. After the Invented SU competition, we both recognize that because we aren't necessarily engineer majors, I would say, we were kind of lacking that expertise. And even though we got through the competition strong, we still felt that we needed an extra person to our team who would just help us and everything like that. And he actually has been great. He's from the Syracuse area, so he's actually had connections with the Onondaga water quality. I think I'm getting that wrong, but he's actually already done some work, and he had an internship with water quality, so it was kind of like the missing person that we needed, and he's been great so far.
And he's an environmental engineer, so he's super into it.
Yeah, we're currently in the process of making a plan for testing, so that's underway, and he's pretty much taking the lead on it, and he's been really good with that. So we're moving.
Yeah.
We're moving. These are our advisors. Dr. Neil Murphy is the retired president of SUNY ESF. Linda actually was able to connect us with him, and that was just one of the great things that Linda was able to do for us. Just being able to connect us to professionals who will also be able to further our mission and our goal. And so he's also one of the top leading water specialists in upstate New York. Dr. Todorova was also recently added to our team. She is a professor in the in the engineering school. And she also served on one of the committees for the UN. She's been a great addition to the team.
Yeah, and she also worked on the Onondaga Lake cleanup project. So she's also pretty familiar with water analysis and that kind of stuff. Siddhant is one of the people that we're connected to in India. So we're working with a school in India called the Indian Institute of Technology. Siddhant and a couple of other people are collecting water and doing small water quality analysis tests for us and kind of sending us the data, as well as kind of pointing me in the right direction in terms of what NGOs to work with. So that's just one of our connections over there. Yeah, so we understand that first world solutions don't always work for third world countries. And so we have found a way to provide access to clean water to the slums of India in a way that is culturally familiar and comfortable for them. And so through PAANI, we really hope to see a decrease in the prevalence of waterborne illnesses in these communities.
And as women of color, that's something that we wanted to highlight as well, is just to inspire women to be the change agents for water filtration within their communities, just because they are the ones who step up to the plate and go out and get the water and do everything that has to be done with the water. So that's something that we wanted to just turn that around and empower them in knowing that what they're doing is actually really important. And so,
yeah, thanks.
Okay, so we shall move on to our next speaker, who is Jamie Newtown. Jamie is the Director of Innovation at Ramboll, and he has been working with them for over 14 years, working in project management, and also has been working as a senior scientific manager as well. Is that correct? Yes, perfect. Okay, so today Jamie will be talking about Ramboll's unique innovation model and how they're integrating students within that and engaging them in these new methods. So thank you.
tough act to follow. That's pretty exciting. And Linda, I guess this is the first time that we've met because some students that I had this summer spent some time with you. Very exciting and nothing but great things to say about the Launchpad. And to the two ladies that just spoke, I would love to talk with you more. I have lots of questions for you, and we can spend hours just questions, getting some of your feedback. Very exciting. I could say when I went to university at RIT back in the late 90s, we certainly didn't have these types of opportunities for entrepreneurial spirit and entrepreneurship. So this is pretty special that you guys get to do this. So as introduced, I am Director of Innovation at Ramboll in the Americas. Formerly, Ramboll in the Americas was O'Brien Gear Engineers, which you probably saw from the PAANI speech. Neil Murphy was a former president and chief executive officer with OEG. We continue to work with Neil, and it's nice to see that you're working with him. I don't know how he finds time to get engaged in all these activities, but he certainly is making an impact here in Central New York on many fronts. So my role within Ramboll started about 7 or 8 years ago, back in 2012, when I was challenged with another colleague of mine to develop an innovation program within a 1,000-person organization. And excuse my language, but I'm like, what the hell is an innovation program, right? Because it wasn't there. 8 years ago, we can talk about the buzzwords for the last 20 years. Was probably something like maybe sustainability, or before that it was so we go through these phases of these buzzwords. Innovation was a buzzword for a while. Now we're into something called circular economy. Does anybody know what that is? Well, guess what? It's a regurgitation of sustainability. We just rephrased it 15 years later, and now we call it circular economy. So innovation started within the organization really to help us differentiate ourselves. We are in a service model, a service-based business, where we sell services like an attorney to clients. Those clients pay for our services, and we implement and execute projects. Well, it gets difficult and even more difficult to compete when there are startups, startup firms. Maybe it's university students that go out and hang a shingle and say, I'm going to do engineering, or it's many of our competitors that exist all across the globe and in Central New York, Western New York, all over the place. So it's harder and harder to compete these days. So in order to compete and win, you have to differentiate. So we leverage this innovation program in order to be different from our competition. What we quickly realized when we established the program is that we had to start at square one. It was really about culture. And when I talk about innovation, and I use the terminology sustainability, we can really lump those all together. If you don't have a culture of collaboration, team building, communication, brainstorming, thinking differently, ideation, you can't have innovation. And those components are really the core of an innovation program. So when I got into this innovation leadership role, I never knew that it was going to kind of feed into all of the softer aspects of what we do, even to the point where it ties back and connects into recruiting a top talent, where eventually I'll get in this conversation. So we stood this program up, and trying to build that culture, we wrote this whole protocol and program about what our innovation program was. We communicated it out to the organization. And then from there, we started kind of chipping away at it. We started with Syracuse University on an external component of our innovation program with what was called Spark. Spark was an innovation type accelerator or competition where we worked with college higher ed students to solve problems. So that was part of our innovation program. That was more externally focused. Internally, we had our own innovation competition. In order to build culture, they had to learn what innovation was. So we created something called iFactor, where we pitch a problem statement to the organization. Those people would join in teams of either, I shouldn't say a team, you could be an individual or participate as a team. And at we'd announce that problem statement in the middle of summer, and they'd have about 2 or 3 months to work towards a solution. And then they pitch it in the fall, like any type of innovation competition, to a panel of judges, and they were awarded some cash prizes. So that helped build culture. It was fun. It brought the organization together. Collaboration, right? Team building, good communication, working across offices. So we learned a lot in terms of what culture development really was. In addition to that, looking at innovation internally, we had our own what we call gating process. So somebody might have a great idea, and we would say, okay, do we want to invest in this idea? Similar to what I'm sure a lot of you are familiar with in many other innovation competitions or within Launchpad or wherever it is, who's going to invest in that, right? So we would put those ideas in front of this team, typically senior leadership, and they would make a decision, is this something that's going to help differentiate us, lead to a new business or service, a new product, and do we want to make an investment in that, a strategic investment to carry that idea through into the execution or into market. So we would put that through its paces through an execution stage gate process. We would check our progress, fail fast, and a lot of learning went on there, a lot occurred. And it also fed back to culture because we were able to communicate back to the organization what was successful, how were we making the business more relevant, how are we differentiating ourselves against the competition. So we learned a lot. Fast forward to about, let's say 2016, we decided to elevate our innovation program to the next level. And we made a board level committee called the Innovation Technology Committee. Now, for those of you at SU who are tuned in to some of your key donors, and especially in the engineering and computer science group, a gentleman by the name of Nick D'Onofrio. Is anybody familiar with Nick? Okay. Nick started a program at SU called the D'Onofrio Scholars, and maybe you ladies might be familiar with the program. I'm not sure, but Linda's not here. He made a significant impact, I would say, on Syracuse University, funding a lot of students in their education. Nick was a board member, an external board member within Legacy OBG, the O'Brien Gear at the time, and we brought him on to chair and develop this Innovation Technology Committee. For those of you who do not know Nick, I bet if you look up his name on Wikipedia or Google or whatever your preference is, Nick was the senior executive at IBM. He led their innovation program with a budget of about $200+ million annually, and made some significant impacts in some of the technology that we use today and are familiar with. He likes to say that he was there in the Watson days and really helped supercomputing go to the next level in the early stages of blockchain. So, Nick is just a tremendous resource for us. So by elevating that innovation to the next level, connecting it at the board with this Innovation Technology Committee, it really elevated our program. It elevated people's minds and attention to the importance of innovation and what it could do to make an impact on the organization to keep us relevant. That's one thing, no matter if you're PAANI, if you're Ramboll, if you're Syracuse University, you have to today be relevant in your space. Right? That's why I really like what you guys are doing. I think it's tremendous. And I love how you connected it back so that it's impactful to a culture that accepts it. Because a lot of times innovation, we try to push out into culture that doesn't accept it, and we wonder why. We learn from that. So, okay. So we continue to elevate our program to the point where we have this Innovation Technology Committee. And we worked on problems. We worked on building culture, and we worked on advancing what we were doing with our great ideation. Not a lot of successes over the first 5 years. We didn't put anything into the market, but we really made an impact on our people. And from a retention standpoint, if you have an innovation program, and from a recruitment standpoint, if you have an innovation program, it seems to resonate. It seems to click. It means it's something that's meaningful, something different that employees can do aside from their day-to-day jobs. So it gave them some new challenges and new opportunities. With that, as we advanced, our Spark Innovation Program continued to build. We continued to build in regions. We had this Central New York hub with Syracuse University. We expanded it to other universities, Clarkson and University of Rochester, and 1 year RPI, all participating here in Central New York with 50 to 60 students. We also enhanced it by bringing in some of our great clients to present problem statements to the students at Spark, where they worked on these problem statements over a 24-hour period. COE, thanks to Tammy and Ed at the time, has hosted this competition for the past couple of years. And it's made quite the mark within the Central New York region because we've connected it. We've built an ecosystem with this Spark Innovation Program where we've tied in folks from Genius New York, the Tech Garden, Center State, from Syracuse University Center of Excellence, to companies that are technology focused here in Syracuse, like SRC and many others. So we made it relevant. So as we built that program, that Spark program, I said we also started to regionalize it. We now have a program in the Southeast, the Midwest, and down in the Philadelphia region. We just had a competition last week with 70 students from UPenn, from Villanova, Drexel, Temple, and Haverford. Now, we attract top talent to these competitions. We had Merck Honeywell, the Chamber of Commerce from Philadelphia that had Exelon and Pico, top energy suppliers in that region. So we bring our top clients into these events to participate with the problem statements. So that all became part of our tremendous innovation program as we continue to build it. And we saw the opportunity of being part of that ecosystem to identify top talent, students from the universities, to have a soft way to build relationships with our clients. Also to see what they're working on, what types of problems are our clients dealing with. Gave us some insight into things that we could sell to our clients since we're a service-based industry. And oh, by the way, with our innovation program, we in a service-based industry are constantly competing with our, have constant competition. When I talk about remaining relevant and differentiating ourselves, well, guess what? Innovation also brings a different mindset in terms of a value stream, valuation of what you're providing. Meaning, if I can find something that's no longer a commodity, but I ideate and differentiate myself and I'm first to market, guess what? I can command a different type of pricing model for this new product. Think in terms of pharmaceutical, right? When they have this, the pharmacy launches a new product, they've got about 1,000% markup on that product when you're buying that pill. 10 years or 12 years later, whatever the patent term is on that, comes off patent, what happens? There's 50 other people that reverse engineered that pill, and they're going to sell it to you for about a quarter on what they invested, right? Because they didn't have that research and development cost. Well, from our standpoint, if we can have a different business model and we can have that same mindset in pricing, we're no longer in a commodity-based market. Does that make sense? So that was a lot of the learning that we did in terms of our innovation program. We really spent a lot of time. And once again, as we continue to progress into the through the pre-Ramboll days, with our own internal innovation, we learned a lot. We made a lot of investments. I think probably in the 7+ years that we've had our gating stage gate process, we probably invest for a smaller company, OBG at the time, 1,000 employees, somewhere around, I'm going to say $500,000 to $750,000 in innovation. That's pretty meaningful. There's not a lot of companies with 1,000 employees that would make that type of a commitment to a program like innovation. Okay, so why are we here today other than that long backstory? Because I'd like to weave it all together by connecting it with this harmful algal blooms, this HABs, bloom optics. So one of the things that we wanted to do, and I talked about recruitment, and we built this great program around Spark, was to extract some of that top talent and bring it in and work on some challenging problem statements. We recognized that we had hurdles with some of our own innovation, not being able to get that innovation to market. So how could we advance that innovation and get it to market? Well, if I'm working on, I've got this great idea, but I'm being pulled 5 different ways on 5 different projects, because we're a service-based industry, and I have to be able to apply myself on those projects to execute them, I can't spend time on this great idea that I have. So what we did in 2018 with our Spark program here in Central New York is we identified 6 students, 3 from Syracuse University and 3 from Clarkson University as summer interns. We went out, we hired them for a 2019, this past summer, what we call think tank program. And we said, okay, let's bury them into some collaborative atmosphere, thanks to Tammy and Ed. We brought them here, and let's have them work on some of our innovation that we can't get to market because we've got competing interests of our great employees. So let's bring them here and see if they can advance it. So day one was a bit of a challenge. We presented the problem statement to the 6 students. That was on June 3rd, and I remember that day very well. And I sat in front of these engineering students. There was aeronautical, there was chemical, there's, Tammy knows better than me, she spent a lot of time with them, having a candid conversation with them about this problem statement, which is around unmanned systems and this, this current major, what I would say, environmental and health issue that is popping up globally, but especially here in all of our freshwater bodies in New York State around harmful algal. And day one, I spent most of that day introducing them to being an entrepreneur and to take everything that they learned in college and throw it aside because they're now business women and men, and they're trying to put something into the market. So take your technology and your technical thinking and push it aside, because guess what? We can find that. Please do not take what I say the wrong way. We can find technology, great engineers. We can find those great people all day long. I could go to one of 1,000 universities in the US, one of 100 in New York, one of 10,000 globally, and find top talent everywhere. But what makes a great engineer or a scientist better is if they have a business mentality, they have entrepreneurial thinking, they can communicate effectively, and they can sell. And I see Linda shaking her head because she probably struggles with this and deals with this quite a bit. So those students sat there and they really looked at me dumbfounded. They're like, okay. But at the end of it, major success. So after we introduced the problem statement, we spent the first week, I came back and I said, you know what, I'm going to challenge you because I think you're a bright bunch of students. There's this competition called Genius New York that has been out for 3 years. Genius New York is a $3 million annual innovation competition with their problem statement focused around unmanned systems, and this year they expanded it to Internet of Things. And I said, we as OVG, now Ramboll, as of January 1 of this year, our CEO sat as the chair of Center State, which is basically the technology, the tech garden, and then Genius New York falls out under it. And I said, he's challenged us for the past 3 years they've held this competition to be in it. And not only to be in it, but be in it to win it. Very cliche. So I said to the students after the first week, I think we're onto something here. I think this is a strong enough problem statement. I think we have a strong enough team. I think you guys are understanding this concept of entrepreneurial thinking. And we're going to focus from now until the end of it on developing a business plan, developing the application, and we're going to enter Genius. So we did. The applications were due early October. We submitted that application to the think tank group. The 3 students from Clarkson and SU went back to their respective schools. They're all seniors and started doing their schoolwork. I still stay in touch with them, and they're doing well, but I can definitely see that their mind's not really into bloom optics anymore, which is what they created. But we submitted the application. There were 410 global applications that were submitted this year to the Genius New York program. We have been shortlisted down to 1 in 19 teams out of that 410 globally, and are in position tomorrow to submit a 10-minute video to see if we can get selected as one of the 5 cohorts for 2020, which will start in mid-January. If you are selected as one of 5 cohorts, you automatically are awarded $500 million for your idea to advance it. But they treat that competition similar to many competitions. There is a competitive component to it. If you want the $1 million prize, they hang a little carrot over top of you. You compete for the first quarter of 20, or you develop and refine your idea for the first quarter of 2020, and then you pitch in April, I believe, those 5 teams to see who gets the $1 million prize for their idea. So I think the story that I want to tell, and I do have a whole PowerPoint here, but I think I've stuck my 10 minutes. I think the story is more meaningful than what's behind the slides. The story here is that we have to look at diversification of thought. We have to look at young, bright minds, and we can't be afraid to try something new, like a think tank, because the end result could be $1 million prize and a new business venture that results in a new pricing model that results in higher revenue and profitability for an organization. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jamie. Can I tell you how excited I am by that whole concept that you've developed in your business? It's marvelous. Okay, so we're running a little bit behind time, but it's okay. So our final speaker is David Repressor. He is the Financing and Implementation Manager at the U.S. Trade and Development Agency. He directs a portfolio of over 70 clean energy projects in sub-Saharan Africa. He has a plethora of experience in clean energy projects across the world, and by all rights, is an expert in bringing companies and governments together to make a difference. So, thank you, David.
Great. And did we decide that this doesn't work?
I work. Yeah.
Well, oh, okay. That's a surprise. Thank you to Tammy, to SyracuseCoE for letting me be a part of this exciting event. It's always tough to go last and follow 2 very compelling presentations. I'll be brief, if only because I'm just on the other side, I believe, of whatever Dr. Manfredi is suffering with right now. My voice is holding up, but it won't hold up for an extended presentation, so I'll be brief with my remarks. I represent the U.S. Trade and Development Agency based in Washington, D.C. The U.S. government is full of export promotion agencies like us. You have your International Trade Administration, representing, as they do, a network of foreign commercial service officers in strategic capital cities all over the world that are of service to American enterprises that want to, for example, engage with Kenya, but they don't have a business development officer in Nairobi. Your foreign commercial service can be your gateway into Kenya to provide you an overview of the market and connections to resources that can help you be successful. You have your Export-Import Bank of the United States, which can provide you with the lowest cost debt that you're likely to encounter if you're a manufacturing enterprise and hoping to ship what you manufacture in Onondaga County to Cote d'Ivoire, something like that. Similarly, the U.S. government has a number of agencies which are engaged in development impact-oriented enterprises, like the U.S. Agency for International Development, which I think would be an interesting partner potentially to PAANI, and we can discuss that in more detail, and many others out there. The U.S. Trade and Development Agency is unique, I believe, among U.S. government enterprises because we do a little bit of both. We are right there at the intersection of the Venn diagram between export promotion-oriented agencies and agencies which are focused on the provision of development impact. So our goal is to create opportunities for U.S. businesses to help create U.S. jobs, help U.S. industry thrive, while promoting development impact in the markets that we serve. And specifically, we want to do that by incentivizing manufacturing enterprises. We want to help manufacturing enterprises in the United States access markets abroad. And we've become very good at that in the 25 or so years that we've been in business. We have auditors that look over our shoulder and evaluate every programming decision that we make. Those auditors have, in turn, auditors of their own, and so we're quite confident in this calculation, which was just recently released, that has illustrated that over the last 10 years, for every dollar that Congress has entrusted to us to program, we are able to attribute about $111 of export content, of additional export content associated with that investment. I'm quite proud of that. So how do we do that? Just what are the tools that we use in order to help U.S. industry be successful, to facilitate development impact in the markets that we serve? Well, the first is very much our brand name. This is where we spend the most money and where we generate the most goodwill in the marketplaces that we serve. Our feasibility studies. With the provision of $500,000 to, let's say, $1.5 million in grant capital, we can help a business based in an emerging market engage with a U.S. company. Collectively, they will conduct a scope of services with the objective of shepherding a project from a conception stage to a stage where that project and that project developer are ready to go to the capital markets and raise the funds that they need in order to turn that stack of CAD drawings into infrastructure. And the idea being, the investment thesis behind our investment is that along the way, that entity in an emerging market will be exposed to opportunities to engage with U.S. businesses. We don't force them to do that. So this isn't what in development speak we refer to as tie date. So it's not mandatory, but we want to show them the value proposition. And we believe that when we do that, U.S. companies will always be at an advantage. Similarly, we will, from time to time, if we anticipate that there is going to be, that the municipality of Cape Town, South Africa, in 6 months is going to be in the market for telecommunications equipment, we can assemble a cohort of strategic procurement officials with whom we have existing relationships, in some cases going back years and years. And we can bring them to the United States to help them engage with U.S. enterprise. We can have them go to the factory floors and shake hands and exchange business cards with the CEO, put on a yellow vest and a hard hat, and really engage in an intimate way with the technology manufactured here in the U.S., so that when, in this case, they return to Cape Town, they have fresh in their minds the value proposition of U.S. enterprise. So we do this in, we do a great deal of this kind of activity. We had a delegation of Kenyan officials from the aerospace sector just this week who are interested in purchasing U.S. manufactured satellite equipment, just to give one example. We have 2 or 3 of those every week through the end of the year. Similarly, and potentially of interest to any entrepreneurs in the room or listening via the webinar, from time to time we sponsor pilot projects. So we will, if our eligibility and evaluation criteria are met, from time to time give an entrepreneur with a technology that has been commercialized, let's say in a developed world context, or at a scale of, at a modest scale. We will give them the opportunity to bring that technology to an emerging market context with a whole suite of development challenges. We will help them with our grant capital, with our technical assistance. We will help them allay risks associated with being the first to deploy a direct methanol fuel cell and telecom tower in Johannesburg, and just to get one. The results can be really profound. From time to time. We fail quite often, as is the story with this sort of investment, and that's something that we're comfortable with. But when we succeed, we can succeed really big. Some of the success stories in our portfolio, of which we're most proud, have come from our pilot project program. So if you are an entrepreneur, either listening in or in the crowd, you may be wondering how you could take advantage of some of these opportunities. Well, the good news is that I would be happy, certainly, to discuss that specific opportunity with you offline, also following the presentation. In a general sense, I'll say that we would like your help in meeting that export loan fund, right? So we would want to understand how engaging with you, providing grant funds to you could help us realize a multiplier on our investment, how that dollar of grant capital could turn into $111 plus or minus, or very plus or very minus, of US manufactured export content. Similarly, we would want to understand the development impacts that would be realized as a result of that investment. This is a conversation about innovation and entrepreneurship. And with the exception of that pilot test slide, I really haven't said a lot about innovation and entrepreneurship. So I'd like to conclude, both because my voice is, as you can maybe hear, running out, and because the last thing that I would like to say is that I hope you can imagine USTDA's grant capital as the kind of capital that is waiting for you at the other end of your research and development journey. Early stage entrepreneurs have a lot of keys to look at in terms of their technology and their business model. If you're able to conquer those challenges and arrive at the other end of that tunnel, USTDA can be your partner in helping you take the commercialized idea and help it scale. That's the charter of our organization. So really, I welcome any questions that you have, and I'll look forward to the discussion to come.
I'd like to thank Brianna, Nikita, Jamie, and David for their insightful talks this afternoon. I'd like to invite them actually to the front for a question and answer session. And then, yeah, we'll see how many questions we can fit into a 5 o'clock. You want to take time for me?
Sure thing.
Okay, we've got about half an hour, so that's good. Okay, so would anybody from the audience like to start questions, or anybody on the webinar that would like to participate? I'll start then. I'll start with Nikita and Brianna. I know roughly what the trajectory looks like when you leave Invented SU, but could you explain to our audience the different infrastructure that's in place at Syracuse to help you as innovators and entrepreneurs?
Okay, I can start.
The microphone is on.
Hello. Okay, so we've recently had a lot of success that we are proud of since leaving the Invented SU competition. And I think we realized that the 6 weeks that went into it, we just did a lot of development that we, I think, weren't even aware of until after we finished. So fast forward to now, how many have we done? We participated in 4 competitions recently. We were able to get some money from those competitions just for funding efforts and just to further our development process. So we also just received grant funding from the Source grant. That's a new initiative on campus that funds creative projects for students. And that funding will go towards research and further development of our product. The competitions were mainly through the Launchpad, Blackstone Launchpad and Bird Library. Anything else?
Yeah, so the resources that we're using right now is mainly the Launchpad. We basically live there with Linda. But like the competitions are through the Launchpad. Linda's really great at evaluating the scenario right now and choosing what connections are most important for us. And so that's been really valuable from the Launchpad and from Linda. So right now we're just kind of moving forward, networking waiting for all this money to continue testing.
For those of you that aren't familiar, the Linda we're talking about, Linda Hartford, what would you say that your primary role is?
So we're only part of this innovation hub at Syracuse University, right? We're the portal, but we are incredibly close partners with the Invented SU program through BPA and the College of Engineering and Computer Science. We're incredibly close partners with the SyracuseCoE and the tremendous work that Tammy and Ed have been doing here for more than a dozen years. The Innovation Law Center at the university, which is also the New York State Science and Law Technology Center, which is really helpful to students doing patent landscapes, helping them with patent strategy. Through Invented SU, they filed a provisional patent. We'll be working with them with professional service providers who work with us to help them think about what a non-provisional strategy looks like. So we have resources across campus. We just help connect them. We also help them connect the resources in the community, whether, again, it's the Biotech Accelerator, the Tech Garden, but then also through our Blackstar and Techstars network, this global network that also can provide resources. What we're really looking to build is more corporate partners here in Central New York, because my goal would be, as we launch these brilliant students and product services and technologies, to create some stickiness, so we're capturing some of it here in Central Upstate New York. So I would welcome anybody's thoughts about how we build those partnerships and relationships.
Very good question. Jamie, do you have any thoughts on how we might continue to build this infrastructure in Central New York?
In terms of specifically with this PAANI group, or just some of the things that are coming out of, I'm also.
All right.
I guess I would say I see that it's already starting, and I think there's a lot of great things that are going on in Central New York. If you look at the unmanned systems and the work that New Air, if anyone's familiar with that, and I've just started to get to know them. To the hub here at COE, to the Tech Garden. There's a lot, I'm from Rochester, and I see it popping up in Rochester too. I think a lot of these cities, within New York State are making a lot of some great strategic investments in this, these makers, from maker spaces to entrepreneurial centers to whatever you want to call them. There's a lot of support network and investment from New York State and beyond that's coming into these centers of excellence. And I think, maybe it's more advanced with the unmanned systems, because that has been a major focus of this region with one of the test hubs here at Griffiths. So I think that's more mature. But looking at these environmental type problem statements and health and safety, folks like myself, that's why I said I've got 100 questions for them. I think it's looking at what your portfolio is and identifying where those corporate relationships could be developed.
So for the Trade and Development Agency, you do reverse trade missions. How do you pick the communities to which you go with those, number one? And two, just for what we just said, we have a growing base of interesting technologies. How do we communicate that to the TDA in a meaningful way that we would get on your radar screen as a place to go? Like if somebody says, geez, these guys are interested in UAS and radar control systems, that it will be on your list. Well, we got to go to Syracuse then, because we know what they've got. How do we do that?
So to address your first question, my preference would be to tell you that we have a sophisticated customer relationship manager with data going back decades, comprehensively profiling every community in the country, and we choose the best ones for each reverse trade mission, but it's just not the case. Too many of those decisions are driven by our personal relationships, which I see as a pretty fundamental flaw. But I'll be here in Syracuse for 3 days, 2.5, I suppose. And one of the meetings that I'm looking forward to most is with, I believe, your colleague, Steve King, at Center State CEO, right? Okay, great. To build just that relationship, to understand the profile of manufacturing here, what the value proposition is of your community, and mine too, by the way, I grew up not far from here, so that the next time a relevant reverse trade mission is under contemplation anywhere in the agency, we're able to flag it effectively. But furthermore, my visit to Syracuse, I'd like to point out, is unusual. I spend much more time in Africa. My portfolio is in Africa than I do serving domestic markets. There's a big appetite to change that, not just for me, but for institutionally, to do more domestic outreach, to get to know manufacturers and to meet them where they are, understand how our tools can be better tailored to meet their needs. So if you're able to join us, last thing I'll say is that we were meeting 2:30 on Thursday in our offices. Okay, so we're going to do that.
So, David, it would seem that approaching the US government for financial support for a company is somewhat intimidating for a startup such as PAANI. How would smaller companies engage with your agency to provide support?
I believe that our agency would probably be the wrong one to turn to. Like I said, the other end of your development journey, right? We could be able to have a productive conversation at that point. But at the moment, our tools are just poorly tuned for what it seems you need. But they're really well tuned for the risk appetite of other facilities around the US government. The one that, to me, I think would be most compelling is a facility within the US Agency for International Development called Development Innovation Ventures. This is a sort of loose cohort based mostly in San Francisco, which is focused on working with startups. They give, and what's interesting about them, unlike an accelerator, an incubator, they give non-dilutive grant capital on the order of $1 million or so. And they shower you with technical assistance. So they surround you with brilliant engineers, similar to the way that an incubator would. And to help you be successful, wherever they see like a spark in your business model that can help them implement against their objectives, which are to achieve commercial scalability. They will want to understand things like your revenue model, which was missing from your pitch. Maybe that was by design, and that's fine. But that's something you want to bring up if you want to have a conversation with the ability of your model to really take root and achieve what commercial sustainability. A great 1, 2, 3 pager on DIP, a nice FAQ that I'll be happy to share.
For sure.
Yeah. Thanks.
I have a question. So, we start with the presumption maybe that, that the student, the early stage entrepreneurs might have a lot to learn from some of the larger global internal innovative experts in the field, like Ramboll, OVG. But I wonder, my question is to Jamie, is turning that around, are there things as you look at student entrepreneurs and early stage entrepreneurs, are there lessons that are valuable in informing the larger organizations as they're thinking about how they can fit innovation into a larger scale company?
Well, it's certainly one of the things, that is in our mindset as we recruit today, are students that have this type of mindset, right? They challenge themselves, they think differently. They have more of a business appetite and perspective. Because at the end of the day, we're in, like anybody, we're in business to make money. And that was one of my great questions I wanted to ask you guys on this. You kind of touched on it. What's the revenue model? And I do want to pick your brain on that. But, I think when you sit in an organization for 5, 10, 15, 20 years, you get used to doing things a certain way. And to be able to bring, as we kind of coined it, bright minds into our organization, organization to challenge us, it makes us think differently. I think that might get at what you were asking. And we are seeing that with some of our new recruits and entry level folks into the organization. They certainly, don't take this negatively. They want to climb the ladder fast. We see that a lot. They do come in, maybe the best word, in terms of their approaches, which is invigorating to a lot of them.
Have you thought about the potential domestic applications of what you do? I mean, obviously, you started with India, but Flint, Michigan, and you start thinking about a lot of different times where water safety has become more and more of a concern in the U.S. Have you given any thought to what the market might be here?
Yeah, so we have thought about it because we are in the early stages of development right now. We really want to just figure out the technicalities of the actual device. And then as we expand, we hope to have like different departments for different areas of the world that we're in, because culture is so important to us. So when we do make it to the United States, we want to make sure that whatever device we create for the water quality in the United States kind of fits the behavioral tendencies of the people living in those communities. So the behavioral tendencies of people who live in Syracuse, New York, what do they use the most? You know, how do they get their water? What is in their water compared to how people in Flint, Michigan get their water, what's in their water, how they drink their water. And so we don't have any really details about it, but it has been in the back of our mind, yeah.
But I think about like the emergency applications people might have, and you have a product that is low cost. Granted, it was built for another culture, but it's low cost. Seems to be effective. That's what it needs to do. And so, as part of, I don't know, health and safety concerns that individual residents might have in the U.S., it's something they may want to use when they get the boil water advisory, which you get all the time and all that good stuff. Is there a way to adapt what you've done? It sounds like you've given some thought to it. Because you could, I just have a sense you could use that same technology in domestic applications now.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah,
for sure.
That's a great suggestion. I think for us also, it's because every community is so different, and that's one of the things we learn in public health. It's just even the issues that come with water, they're so different depending on each community. So I think for us, it's just acknowledging that and making sure that we also know what we're talking about and know which communities that we're going into. I think it's for us to also learn that before developing or before entering into development to another place, you know, we should have the research on what's going on there. We should have a needs assessment that's done that tells us personally what the results are, so that we know how best to identify, you know, what the problem is. Is it the access? Is it, you know, how long they have to walk? There's so many different things, you know, so those are important for us as well.
So where do you see your project being by this time next year?
Well, we hope to implement it into the community by the end of this year. Well, the end of 2020. So yeah, we hope to, I guess this time next year, be in India, kind of on the ground, figuring out how we're distributing it and all that stuff. Yeah. Brianna's getting her MPH, so she's going to be in school for another year. Yeah. But part of her MPH program is actually to study abroad, right?
Yeah. So yeah. I could talk about that. So Falk just offered an opportunity for a 4+1 program. So I'm a senior, and I've started grad school courses now, so that it's kind of like, you know, it's usually 2 years for the master's, but instead of 2 years, I'm just doing it in one. And I kind of made that decision just so that personally, I wanted to be a doctor my first 2 years, but I thought about it. And once I thought about public health, I figured the time that it would take for me to be in medical school, I could have my MPH and be working in just a field that is probably just more hands-on and interesting for me. And in those 10 years, I'd be just like much more advanced in a position that I want to be in probably than, you know, just getting out of med school and trying to find a place that is for me. I don't know, just my path. Yeah, so this time next year, I'll be working on my MPH, almost finished.
But in India, working
Yeah.
to implement the device into the community. The community that we're going to start in is called Darvi, and that's where this time last year we had an NGO go and do a community assessment. So in March, we're going to go to the same area that we've already kind of assessed, talk to them about where we are, what they like, what's kind of confusing for them, make the changes, and then implement by the end of December.
And what about the manufacturing issues?
So the manufacturing, we hope, we're looking into it right now, but as we move forward between, I want to say like June and August, we hope to secure manufacturing and distribution in India.
And we're hoping that because our product features a sari cloth, we can use any manufacturers who may be into the fabric industry and may want to, you know, help us out, or if we, you know, raise enough funds, are able to do it for us.
And the market will be municipalities or individuals?
So as we're incorporating, we're looking to work with foundations. So something like a benefit corporation where we can work with foundations, but also have direct sales. So working with local hospitals as part of a health impact initiative to distribute the filters as preventative methods, for example, so the women in the communities don't have to pay a fee or anything like that, or going through foundations, having the foundations essentially buy it from us, use the NGOs for distribution and recycling and reuse and things like that.
So when you say that you want to use sari, so is it any particular material of cloth which you are looking for, like cotton or something?
Yeah, right now we're using Georgette. We found that Georgette filters out cholera. So it's just the best option for us in terms of water filtration.
Yeah, so with the sari, there's different fabrics, I guess, that are, you can explain it probably better than me.
Yeah, so when I was talking to my mom about this, she was like, you know, saris are usually cotton or silk, most commonly. But when I was doing research, I found that Georgette actually works really well. And so for our prototype, we have a Georgette fabric. Yeah, so.
And why did you specifically selected Dharavi?
So when I went to India last year, my family lives close to the slum in Mumbai. And so I was around the area, and, you know, when we were doing research on it, we found that it was the largest slum in all of Asia. And you really have you seen it? Yeah. You really have to see it to understand what it looks like. Yeah.
But I think also the opportunity there, so it also just has a very large population that we knew if we were able to target, this would just be our best first population because we'd get a lot of data. We'd know just kind of the important things that go into implementation into one of like the hardest communities to implement a product.
And there also wouldn't be a language barrier since we're in India and I speak Hindi. And so, yeah.
Sure, yeah, don't know if it's legal. I'm just really curious about the data that you're going to gather. Thinking down the road towards the end of your pilot test, how would you define success, and what data are you going to gather to support that contention?
So I think our main focus right now is decreasing the prevalence of waterborne illnesses. So when we do partner with local hospitals and they do start this preventative method, we want to be able to collect all of the data based on, you know, how much has ER costs lowered? How many less citizens have been admitted with waterborne illnesses? How has it affected the death rates? How does it affect the, child mortality rates? And so that's kind of the data that we want to collect to verify that our product is actually making a difference. Well, we're only working in the Dharavi slum right now, and so the water is essentially our control because we know the bacteria in the water in that specific slum has the same issues all around. Yeah.
But also we are open to any suggestions or advice that you both have for us.
For sure.
From what it seems like, you have a lot of, just, I think for me as a public health major, just stepping into the business world has taught me a lot that I just probably would not have been exposed to by the time I graduated. And so I'm also just very thankful for that. It's just having the opportunity to talk with just people who are from different backgrounds, completely different backgrounds, but networking is important. Just like knowing people who know people, just see your presentation are like, oh, I know this person. So I've learned a lot from just different professionals who I probably would never have interacted with as a public health professional. So, yeah.
What are both of your undergrad, I'm sorry, you already said it, your undergrad program, both of you?
Public health.
Yeah, we both came in pre-med though. Brianna's public health and I'm economics.
Okay.
I finished all my pre-med courses, but my journey to medical school has been put on hold.
Well, David really addressed it. I was curious about testing, what testing you've done, what that looks like in the future, and how it relates to your timeline.
Well, I wish Jacob was here because he has the best answer to that question. But we've done basic water analysis using the Harbor Lake water. At InventedSU, we had resources through that, with labs and stuff. So we've done basic water quality testing. As we move forward, though, our environmental engineer, Jacob, and we're also working with Dr. Todorova at SU, and the Source Center, I guess, because they're basically funding the testing. But we're going to do testing on the reactivity between the chemicals, the reactivity with the chemicals in the water, and also with the sun because India is hot. And so there's that. We'll also be testing the sensory mechanism, which is made out of beeswax and lawson powder, both organic materials found in India, just to test, what's the accurate weight in order for it to expose the dye at the same time the filter has completely degenerated. And so that's kind of where the testing is going right now.
So when you right now are working with Ramboll, which has a great reputation as an innovative firm in other parts of the world that they want. You talk about how you're doing good innovation within OB&G and so Ramboll, now that Ramboll's acquired them. Is there a way that some of the Ramboll technologies that have been developed in other parts of the world will be disseminated into the U.S.? Because I'm just particularly interested in, I read a lot about some of the clean energy, clean air things that they've done in Europe, and interested about how that gets here.
Yeah, so great question. It's interesting because Ramboll started their innovation program about the same time that OBG did. And their focus over the past, I would say, handful of years or the last probably 3 years has really been in digitalization. But they do have, innovation program and making investments in innovation. They've got, some pretty unique laboratory space that can do testing and design of some of their, like you said, maybe it could be on the air compliance side or filtration. Right now, we're so immersed into integration that we're learning a lot. So every day I learn something new about the organization on a global basis, but, have had conversations with, they have a chief innovation officer that sits on their group executive board, who's been to Central New York a few times and I've had many conversations with her. And direct answer is yes. Once we get through this integration, once we learn what each company is doing, what types of innovation we have, they've got some great stuff going on here in the Americas themselves in terms of innovation. A couple of startups that they're working on, they've made some strategic investments in some of the mining operations down in the southeast and resurrecting the properties, and then also on the air side in terms of air quality, leveraging some new technologies. And what's unique about what they're working on, both from a surface standpoint and air standpoint, and I never really got into what Bloom Optics is other than mentioning its apps, but it's water quality. So we've got a pretty cool thing going on right here in the US that was unintentional, where we've got unmanned systems and sensing technology and air, water, and on the surface all occurring at once. So just trying to figure out how those parts and pieces fit together is really a bit of a challenge. But one of the other things that are really trying to move forward with in the U.S. is going to be offshore wind. The controversy out of it, but I've made a couple of trips to Copenhagen, and there's wind turbines right there in the ocean, spinning all day long. So they do have a strong energy presence in Europe and the Scandinavian region that they want to bring that those energy sources to the US. That would be the answer to the question.
Any other questions? Okay, I think I have my last one. So, as an educator, how can, in your opinions, prepare my students to be creative thinkers in multiple industries and really push innovation forward in clean tech, sustainable solutions, energy?
Great, well, if PAANI is an indication, you're doing a good job. Yeah, I'd say like the goal, like a critical goal that educators can play is to, is like oriented more towards an inspiration, right? That maybe you can inspire them to think, as perhaps all of us do, that these that the challenges, particularly those folks in emerging markets, are profound, and will take the careers of lots and lots of smart people to address, and providing inspiration and guidance to sort of pursue those good ideas wherever they lead. I think would be a worthwhile pursuit for an educator.
Yeah, I think I mentioned it a bit in my discussion. In terms of the education that at the higher ed level tends to focus, on that core curriculum, and whether it's aerospace engineering or it's chemical engineering, but the more that higher ed can weave in the softer concepts into the program, the better. And that's education, things that I mentioned, certainly strengthens that student to enter the job market. And I see, I've got a 7-year-old, and I see it built, some of those concepts emerging in second grade already. Some of the things that they're doing, which to me is pretty cool, right? They're doing collaboration. They're doing these team building type learning lessons in the classroom, which, once again, reflecting back on my education, that never really, that wasn't part of it. And that certainly is going to help, as they progress through their education and into the workforce. But our most successful people are the ones that can adapt to change. They've got that business mentality and can work in a collaborative environment.
there any skill set that you see in your undergrad education that we can help with today?
I learned a lot. So, like, there were a lot of skills, I guess, in that SQL. For one, presentation skills. So every week we got recorded and we did kind of like the same pitch every single week, but we changed things to it. So definitely that. I think also self-criticism, but also professional criticism. I think as students, it's important to learn the difference between the two and learn the benefits that come from, the positive criticism that you can get.
Well, I haven't been in a design or engineering class, so I don't really know what's taught. But I think that after doing the whole pre-med thing and like realizing, maybe that's not for me, like, I think that people or students relate to and learn from what affects them the most. So I think as a professor, if you can just like, for example, like, the water quality in Syracuse is so bad, but like I didn't even learn that until I was like looking into the water quality. And so that directly affects me, my skin, every other girl who's worried about their skin. And so like, whatever, I'm working on a water quality solution. I think in design classes or engineering classes, if you can like encourage people to like come up with things that they can relate to, I don't know, I feel like a more enjoyable time doing it.
And I agree. The collaboration and being truly interdisciplinary in your education is very, very important. And many educators will know you are very siloed. You have a very full curriculum, so trying to carve out these spaces is incredibly hard. But I think working with Launchpad and all the other colleges in the university that want to engage, we can work out ways to carve out some space in the curriculum rather than having to rely solely on extracurricular activities to develop this.
We are actually just perfect.
Oh, okay. Well, I'd like to thank our speakers again. Thank you very much.